Here we are, back at the bench. My first video for the year 2021. Hopefully it comes out okay. I'm intending for this to be kind of short. Please don't be offended by the title, Jnats for Dummies. It's just sort of like one of those things like the Dummies books. You know, when I was taking A+ certification classes, I used an A+ certification for Dummies book because it was easy and simple and to the point and easy to reference. Here we have a razor. This is a test razor. It lives in the kitchen. It has problems. It has issues down at the bevel. Bunch of pitting. You can see some like grief over here, right? I checked the clean areas for striations and what's going on, and sort of a precursory test. Soligen 5.8. Here we have a Nezuko. For those of you getting into Jnats, you'll find some are stamped, some are not. Stamps don't mean anything. You don't know who put this on here. You have to trust your seller. You have to trust the seller's wholesaler. I can tell you right now, the formatting of the stamp is not correct. It's not authentic. You have to realize that a Nezuko is not necessarily better or worse than a stone from any other mine. Shobu, Nakayama, Iwatani, whatever. You judge a stone based on its merits, not the name of the mine. If you're buying by the name and the stamp, you're going about this the wrong way, okay? So what you have here is a very thin, maybe 10 millimeters piece of Nezuko. It has some Karasu lines in it. You can see some coming through down here and then some coming through over there too. How do I know it's a Nezuko even though the stamp is hinky? How do I know the stamp is hinky? I've been doing this a long time. I can tell you that's a hinky stamp. I know the guy who sold it to me, who had a pile of Nezuko, and this is one of them, and he had bought this pile from someone, and it's all authenticated, but the stamp doesn't mean shit, okay? It could say Nagayama, it would still be a Nezuko, but it wouldn't matter. Follow me? Please, don't get into the whole, oh, Nakayama is better thing. I keep seeing posts from old-timers, oh, I bet you that was honed on the Nakayama. Whenever you read something like that, the person saying it doesn't know what they're talking about, because Nakayama is not better than anything else just because of its name. So, anyway, back to this. A little bit of Karasu going on in there. You see I got a piece of G10 on the back because it's very thin. It's all completely sealed. I've had this for so long, I don't even remember when exactly I got it. It's got to be like 3 or 4 years. Anyway, I was going to keep it for myself, but I think it's going to wind up in the store because I keep stuff because it's cool, but I run out of space. So there's that. So what I'm going to do is what you should do when you get your stone. Jnats for Dummies. Remember, we're starting from the beginning. First thing, buy from a reputable seller that's selling you a stone based on its merits, not the name of the hole in the ground it allegedly came out of, because there's a lot of bullshit stamps out there. You'd be surprised to find out which sellers are stamping their own stones. You would be totally surprised. Totally surprised. Anyway, you get it home, you lap it flat, okay? Chamfer the corners, chamfer the edges. You chamfer the edges so you don't have a 90-degree angle there, which is precarious and a little dangerous for the stone. It makes for a very fragile corner, so you can like roll it off if you want to. I usually just put a 45 chamfer on it, and that makes the edges a lot more stable, and it also allows you to have clear runway for the blade. When you have a 90-degree angle, you can get some stuff that pokes basically straight up, you know, bits of the stone. You don't want that because that'll get in your way. When you chamfer it off and then you sort of like lap into it, give it a little bit of a roll, you remove all of those tedious edges and corners, and you have a nice, safe honing surface. I just need nice flat stones. Every stone is the same, dead flat. That way I can move one blade, any blade, from stone to stone to stone, stone, and it's always the same. No problems. I don't need stone, flat, bump, flat, curve, flat, whatever. No, none of that. Consistency is what it's all about. So stick to that. In the beginning, after you know what you're doing, go play. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go lap this and then come back. So stay tuned. I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. Got the blade taped up. I remembered that I had taped this because I'm going to be doing a shitload of honing on it to try and clear the pitting down here, and I didn't want to like put like a 1/4 inch flat on the spine. I'll figure this out as I go. I'll check bevel angles periodically. Like I said, it's a test razor. It doesn't matter. Okay, so now the stone is lapped flat. All right, so the edge is chamfered. The corners have been dressed down also, so there's like a little diamond flat there, so I don't have any like sharp corners or edges that become friable and a liability to the stone. Stuff like that can actually wind up causing a fissure later on. So you actually really almost have to do that. The sealing, is up to you on a super hard stone. You might not think it's necessary, but there are fissures that you can't see sometimes, so sealing always makes sense. As far as putting a G10 thing on the bottom, that's just whatever, overkill, but I wanted to protect this stone. So it's pretty neat. It's a little harder than I thought. All right. After lapping, the pattern is a little less pronounced, so that's fine. So that's that. So anyway, so I got the blade taped. Yeah, so what's next? All right. So with most razors and most beginners, I tell everyone, get your synthetics out, do a bevel set 1K, do a 3K or a 5K or something. Get yourself up to about 5K, 8K on those stones. That helps you set geometry. That helps you get your bevel in position. And that removes some of the unknowns that occur when using a natural stone. As time goes on, you get your skills down, you progress, you get better. You can jump to naturals. You employ Nagura, and you can jump from a 1K, straight to Nagura. But I don't recommend that in the beginning because it's harder, more difficult. There are more hurdles, almost guarantees frustration. So you start with synths, do your 1 to 8K. If you want to be daring, go with a 5K, and then move over. And when you move over to the Jnat, I don't recommend going straight to Jnat. I recommend going to Nagura slurry. Start with Botan. Botan is most coarse. Okay. And as you progress through the Nagura, you go from Botan, you go to Tenju, you go to Majiro, and then you go to Koma Nagura, which is the finest of Nagura, and then you move to Doma Nagura, which is your finishing step. Slurry from this would be finest. Finest to start off with, finest to end off with. All right? I have a bunch of different tomos out. They can take on any shape, size, format, look, style. Tomo can mean a lot of things. A lot of people refer to it as same stone. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a piece of the exact same stone. It just means it's the same style of stone. This Jnat, finishing stone quality, we call it Awasedo. Awasedo. People also refer to it as Hanzen or Hanyama. Hanyama is technically only for stones from Nakayama and Shobu, but it's misused today. There's a joke in Japan. It says Hanyama, now available at 52 locations, because it's all watered down. So they will call it Ozuko Hanyama, which technically it really isn't. But like the Jnat police aren't coming out after you. So anyway, another thing people like to do, they like to use a diamond plate they call it a diamond Nagura, instead of using a Tomo Nagura. These cost more than these, unless this is special and it's been, fully sealed or whatever. But, for the most part, this little diamond plate thing is pretty pricey for what it is. And my problem with this is not that it doesn't work. It can work. It can also create problems. This is a 1000 grit diamond plate. You've already brought your edge up to 5K, 8K. Now you're creating particles that are 1000. Now, people will tell you it'll break down, it'll catch up. Why insert grief, aggravation, drama, and uncertainty into the mix? No point to me. Okay, the Tomo Nagura are available. It's not like they're not available, so there's no point really in not getting one. Oh, you bought a cheap stone from eBay and the guy didn't give you a Tomo. Well, what are you buying crap on eBay for? Let's start there. That's a whole different road. I'm not going to go down there. Those guys don't even know what they're selling for the most part. They just make stuff up and people buy it and they eat it up. Oh, it's like it's gravy. It's like, oh, it's great, you know. And I'm like looking at the stone saying, that's like a tool grade stone from a barrel in a hardware store that sells for like 25 US dollars, the equivalent of, you know, it's like, dude, get a clue. All right. Doesn't mean you have to spend $1 million, but, you know, too good to be true. It probably is. So anyway, so there's that. So let's just talk about making slurry. I'm not going to, you know, do a complete honing here. This is just a tutorial. I'm just showing you some stuff. Somebody recently left a comment. He said, for my videos to be worth anything, I have to shave after every, you know, honing. Like, shut the fuck up, asshole. No, I don't. I don't have the time for that. I don't have the patience for it, and there's absolutely no point. I've been doing this long enough. I've honed enough blades. I think I honed like 47 blades last month. You know, that I have some skills. I have some understanding. I have some knowledge. I have a good foundation, and I have a good like scope on things. So I don't need to constantly prove myself to like these who bags that show up. They have disposable accounts. They're just here to like troll and argue. No content of their own, no followers, no nothing. Just a bunch of assholes out there on the internet some days. So anyway, Botan Nagura. Let's just say we jump from AK, now we're coming to Botan. So you get your stone nice and wet, right? How do you know it's Botan? Well, first of all, you can look on my website and you can see the stamps. But Botan, see this little tiny like rectangle here? Botan always has 3 characters in katakana. Take, for example, take a look at Majiro. You see it's 2 characters and it's kanji. Majiro has like basically 2 rectangular ones. And if you look at the one for Tenju, you have 2 that aren't rectangular and one looks like a T. So anyway, if you're ever confused, just shoot me an email. I'll hook you up with, take a picture of your Nagura, send it to me, and I'll tell you what it is back. And if you put 3 in a row, I'll give you left or right. That's for Etsy people, not just people like buying stuff from eBay and want to figure stuff out. You buy stuff on eBay, talk to the guy you bought it from. I don't have time for that. But he wants me to solve problems that those bogus sellers create. I'm sorry, I don't have time for that noise. So here I am. Sorry to be like that, but do you have any idea how many emails I get a week? Why am I looking at the bottom? Because I noticed that there are spots here that I didn't see before. You will notice the grade stamp is Betsu. Betsu is generally speaking all white, but this has some orange modeling that would be typically assigned to a stone. That's Tokyo. Okay, Tokyo grade means not square and has some orange or stripes or something. And this has some spots, but not enough absolutely to get it out of the Betsu range. Now, see, I have a lot of slurry. You'll find a poobah tell you, I'm thinking of one specific poobah who has repeatedly told people to not make a lot of slurry. You do want to make a lot of slurry. Jnats is slow. Makawa Nagura is slow. You need a lot of slurry, okay? Because you want to get an even hit all the way across the entire blade. It's going to take time. If you're in this and you want speed, get out of Jnats because they ain't fast. Just realized that my mic wasn't plugged in, so I hope that audio isn't all that terrible. You want to have a lot of slurry so you can get a nice, even amount of work. If you don't have enough slurry, chances are you're going to wind up with spotty work across your bevel, all right? See how fluid that is? See how it drips off? All right? Let me show you what slurry that's too thick looks like. It's hard to actually create slurry that's too thick. What happens usually is you start working it and it thickens up. See how that's not going anywhere? You don't want that. Avoid that. So anyway, so there you go. How long does this take? How many laps? How many strokes? How many grams of Nagura dust go into how many cc's of water? Forget that. You make slurry, you work it. You work it till it's done. So how do you know when to move to the next Nagura? Okay, this requires feel. Hopefully, after using synthetics, you learn to feel feedback. The differences between, like, say, a 1K or a 1.5K and the next stone, a 5K, and the difference between that 5K and the 1K and or the next stone after the 5K, which would be your 8K. I'm talking about shotgun pros. You also learn to look at the bevel with a loop, and you get to judge the amount of polish, whatever. And when you judge, you do it in the same place with the same exact light source every time. You don't change stuff. I always check under my lights at the bench, because they're a constant. When I change those bulbs, I change them with the same bulb. So I have some consistency there. So what happens when you're honing? Now, I know that there's a guy on the internet who pretends to be a man of science, and perhaps he has some kind of job that has something to do with some type of science. I don't know. Personally, I don't have a whole lot of regard for the guy, to be honest, because I think he's just a ego-driven, confirmation bias-based person. Okay, so here I am back with a cornflake. So, as you can see, and Jnat particles of abrasive, the silica in Jnats actually is sort of like this, almost exactly. They're not geometric like you would find in a synthetic or even some slates, that have very clear cleave lines that give you those, those long triangular and polygons that are very flat-sided, angular, and geometric and definable. They look like this. So they get wet, they get saturated, they get worked, and the genius in question, he keeps telling people, oh, they don't break down, because he says, oh, they're always, the same size. It's not how this works. This particle wears. It just, the peaks and the valleys, they smooth out. It's not like it becomes pulverized like, for example, peppercorns in a mortar and pestle, which is actually a good exercise for discerning feedback. If you're not like sort of understanding what I'm talking about, get a mortar and pestle and get like coarse salt or something and put them in there. And as you pulverize, you'll feel the difference go from coarse to smooth, and that can help you understand what the difference that's going on between two different grades of Nagura. But back to the Jnat and everything else, and the abrasives in here, they're not polygons like you would expect. They're more like this, and when they wear, the dimension that we're talking about is not length by width by depth. It's not trackable like that. And if you follow the striations on the steel with high magnification, as you progress, you will see the striations come closer together, become less deep, and the polish come up higher, even though it's almost always a semi-matte or hazy finish. Anyway, that's what happens. So the trick of knowing when to jump from one Nagura, Botan, for example, in this case, to here, has everything in the world with being able to sense with your fingers. It's all right here, okay? The difference in the feeling of the steel on the stone with the slurry. It can be slight, it can be drastic, it can be a nuance, it can be like flashing neon signs, but it's there. And you have to learn how to feel. Until you learn how to feel, you just hone your ass off until the slurry feels exhausted, like you can't go any further, and then you're probably done. These particles, it's not going to do that, okay? It maybe sometimes it does, okay, but it's not going to do that every single time. It's just going to wear gently. It's not going to do this drastic thing that you would expect from some type of man-made particle. This is just a cornflake of silica that's going to gently wear down and scoop. It doesn't dig in like a cat's nail. It scoops in very gently, sort of like a very, very wide radius woodworking tool, the way you scoop little bits of wood out instead of digging out tremendous amounts all at once. Very gentle. That's why it's so slow. So anyway, you progress through the 3 Nagura, okay? You do your best with that, and you pay attention to everything, okay? Pay attention, write it down, pay attention. Turn the radio off, turn the TV off. Tell people in your house to leave you alone. You need to focus and you need to concentrate. You need to almost meditate on it while you're doing it. So these little vibrations in your fingertips start to speak to you in a way that you can hear a little more easily. If you got like the radio blaring, you're kind of getting in your own way. That's just for me. You can do that later on after you get your skills. But if you're worrying about I don't know when to jump, then try and isolate, okay, the situation from all of your distractions so you can focus on this. And you get yourself over to Koma Nagura, which can take forever and a day to break down and get you to that finish. And then you move over to your Tomo Nagura. You do Tomo Nagura exactly the same way, and you go all the way to finish. And you just hone to your heart's content. Again, you got to keep it wet. You can't let it get thick. If you let it get thick, your very, very, very fine, delicate edge of the razor can be damaged beyond repair. You won't be able to come back from it. You may or you may not. So keep it wet all the time. How do you finish on Tomo slurry? Or an ancillary question is, do you finish on Tomo slurry or do you go to water only? There are no rules. There are no absolutes. You got to try your stone. You got to figure out your skill set. If you have a super hard stone, water-only laps are usually very difficult. Possible, yes, with good skills. You got to have touch, super, super light touch that can navigate the blade's tendency to gravitate to the stone through suction. You have a high polish on the blade and a very, 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 very flat, very hard stone. The two are it's going to seem like they're attracting each other. They're not. It's just a matter of the two polished surfaces. The water's going to squish out and create a vacuum. What happens is you can wind up sort of dulling your edge doing that. If you have a little bit of a warp, you might not sense it, so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that factor in, so there's no absolutes. How do you finish, Keith? Most of the time. Most of the time. Not all of the time. Most of the time, I finish on what I call trace slurry. All right. Trace slurry, that's too much. That's more than trace slurry. It's hard to judge because the lighting. All right, this is a little closer. So what I do is when I'm honing, I'll keep adding water to it and dilute my initial slurry quantity and quality, density. Remember this, quantity is one thing, density is something else. They're two different things. You can have a lot of slurry and it's all thin. You can have a lot of slurry, it can be all thick. You can have a little slurry that's very thick, or you can have a little slurry that's very thin. Don't mix the two up. We want the slurry to be thin, okay? We want enough of it to work with. When we talk about finish, I don't even know if you can pick this up. I don't know if the camera's going to see it, but there is just a hint of color in the liquid on top of the stone. There's just a little bit of what's going in there, and that's usually how I wind up finishing. Takes a very long time to get there, and I spend a long time doing it, and occasionally I do go to all water, and sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes I finish with a little bit more particulate in my finished slurry than what you see right here, where it might pick up a little bit more coloration, just a little bit. And my finishes then, it's usually based on supreme lightness of touch. They call lighter than weight of the blade, which I know people argue with that because they can't wrap their heads around it, but you know, weight of the blade would be due to gravity, okay? And basically you're holding back a little bit from that, and it's a skill you develop over time. Anyway, so that's how I would finish. How you finish is up to you, okay? You learn what works best for you. Try things. Try slurry. Try trace slurry. Try all water. Try a combination of both. Go back and forth. Maybe you get to all water and come back and do a trace slurry. I mean, I do finishing things that get pretty convoluted sometimes just because I hone so much. I just like treat myself to like bizarro finishes. So I do these togglings between different types of slurry with, you know, multiple types of Tomo Nagura, and you know, anything can happen. Here's a piece of Uchigumori that I've been sort of qualifying for the past couple of days going on my Etsy store. Anyway, so I'll mix and match things. But you, at the beginning, starting out, anyone just getting their feet wet in this, get your Tomo Nagura slurry. You might want to use a little bit less than you would, say, with one of your Macau Nagura slurries. A little bit, just markedly, just a little bit less. All right? And work with that and dilute it and get it thin, then get it thin, then get it thin, and train your feeling to identify what you're doing at the edge. And it's going to take literally a lot of trial and error. You're going to have to sort of get a feeling and then test that edge and then match the edge quality to that feeling, and then keep doing that over and over and over and over. I'm talking about honing every day, honing multiple times a day, honing multiple blades over and over and over and over again. It's work, but that's what this is all about. It's not add water and stir, okay? And you get there. Alrighty, so that's it for the finishing thing. Going back now to our regular scheduled programming. I think that's kind of it. That's all I wanted to do was touch base on basic process. I didn't want to go too far into too many things, all right? Just keep it simple for everyone just starting out. You got your Hanyama, you got your Hanzan, you got your Awase-do, all right? You have Botan, you got Tenju, you got Majiro, you got Koma, you got Tomo Nagura. That's your basic setup. Can you work without some of these? One of the things I tell people is, if you go to AK, when you're learning, there's a thing on my website. It gives you a breakdown of how to test your progress. So basically, you hone to 8K or 5K or whatever, then you jump to Botan, you see if you improved your edge. If you haven't, you keep honing on Botan until you figure out that incremental bump and you have an edge that's better than it was off the synth. And then you go forward, and with each progressive Nagura, you test with a shave to see if you got better. That's a good way to go. Now, that's a good learning proof. As a general rule of thumb for people starting out, I don't know that you're going to need Botan every time you go to work. It's very helpful to remove all of the striations from the synthetics, so at that level it's good, but it's also a little coarse. As you progress down the road, you're probably going to find you don't always need Botan. In the beginning, out of Tenju and Majiro, you could feasibly remove one and just learn one of these two Nagura. By isolating one, your learning process will speed up, but you have to put in a lot of honing. If you're going to hone once a month, it's not going to work. You're just not going to get it. Your reference points, you forget them in 72 hours, right? Same with Koma, right? Add Koma in later, all right? So at a bare minimum setup right here, you're kind of like basically good to go. You could like go like this. You're not learning here. If you want to learn, you're going to need to put the sequence in. Working with all of these will teach you everything you need to know about what's going on here. Just bare bones honing. This setup could possibly get you to a decent place. Adding Coma is going to give you more refinement. Adding Majiro is going to enhance that finishing refinement. Adding Botan is going to give you flexibility on the low end. And that's how it goes. Listen, I'm sure I missed stuff. I know there's some techniques that I didn't talk about. Like, for example, going from one Nagura to another, you got to totally clear the stone. I would suggest doing a Tomo Nagura lapping. Just make, sort of a slurry and then wash it all off just to clear your particles so you don't want contamination. You can soak these Nagura. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Again, this is like Jnats for dummies. So just wanted to keep it as fast and simple as I possibly could. I probably went over time. Anyway, listen. All of this stuff, it's always the same thing, right? It's always all about having fun. Let me get my penguins out here because they like to be in for the final closing shots. All right? This is all about having fun. If you're not having fun, stop. You're doing something wrong. This is only about having fun. This is enjoyment. This isn't about being a wizard or a poobah or the smartest guy in the internet. This isn't about fighting with people on internet forums to prove them wrong or prove you right. Well, it shouldn't be. For some people, apparently it is. But the idea here is to get some zen, to get some peace of mind, to get a good shave so you can feel good about yourself. All right? So always keep that in mind. All right? So until next time, take care. Talk to you soon.